All right, and welcome to the third episode of Aegis and Cheese. I'm here with Benji and our special guest for this episode, Avo Plus. We're going to be breaking down the qualifiers for each of the three regions that are starting off this week. We have Avo Plus on for Eastern Europe and South America right now, and then we're going to have another special guest for Southeast Asia as well. So on these qualifier episodes, we're going to be breaking down their favorites, what makes them the favorites in the region, who's the most likely to win, who are the best players, the best the best strats, the heroes that we're going to be seeing. And then maybe we'll talk about some outsiders that could make like a deep run, and maybe some people from the lower bracket that we you might not expect to do so well, but could surprise you. I think we should just get right into it. Benji.
Okay, so starting with Eastern Europe, that's the region we're going to be looking at the moment. I would say that, and Avo, stop me if you disagree, I'd say the favourites are most likely Team Spirit, Na'Vi, and AS Monaco Gambit. I'd say that those are the three top picks for winning the qualifiers.
Yeah, I'll probably agree. At least the public opinion is like that. In my personal opinion, though, I might replace Gambit with PugChamp, to be honest, because I am one of those people that says, if a team has shaky performances, right, if they're up and down, much like PugChamp, I give them more chances of having really good performances and make it to the end, rather than a team like Gambit, who I feel like it's consistently not there, right? Rather than having shaky performances. With the previous Gambit, I would have said yes, but I don't know if they're going to have enough time. I don't think Aine and Lorenov are bad players by any means. I just feel like the team literally just formed, and you change two players, quite a big identity change. PugChamp, on the other hand, have been steadily improving for a while. I honestly do give him a solid chance of being able to make it through. But to me, Team Spirit and Na'Vi are definitely the favorites by a long shot.
Yeah, so I do want to get your thoughts on Gambit for a second. So you said that you wouldn't consider them in the top three. What did you think about them at the major? Because for me, I saw them losing two of probably their best players in No One and Taneko, bringing in Lorenov and BZZ, who were like lower division players. And then I was actually really impressed with what I saw them at the major. But obviously there is a slight change for the qualifiers, bringing in Aina other than BZZ. But just curious to see how you thought they did at the major and whether they can sort of translate that success over to the qualifiers.
Yeah, I think the performance of the major was, to me, also quite surprising. I didn't expect them to do as well. I was very, very impressed with Lorenov. I mean, I've been impressed ever since I watched him in lower division. I think the guy is really good. He's like the next up-and-coming mid laner. In fact, I have a little story about it because I was at the major. I was with Beast Coast there, and I've explained this on stream before, but the Gambit manager he just kept talking to us. He's a fan of Bisco, so we talked a lot, and he was telling me about Lorenov and his performance, right? And I mean, the guy is completely new to the competitive scene, especially he's never played in LAN, and the whole team was really worried that he's gonna be so nervous, he doesn't know what to do, he might be shy around the team. Complete opposite. Lorenov was actually the driving force apparently in the team, constantly reaching to improve. He was so pumped to play at the major, and he even was playing ranked 12. I think he was telling me there's 12 ranked a day or something, 12 ranked matches a day to prepare, which is kind of insane. That's 12 hours a day at Dota, maybe 13, 14, if one goes long. So the guy, I think, has the right attitude. I have a lot of trust in him. The question, though, is whether the team can make this work just yet. I feel like if he had maybe one more month, I would trust him. But EEU being so close, that's my concern with Gambit here. I don't think they have enough time to make sure the draft works for them.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's a possibility, but as you said, it's a team changing a lot of their most integral pieces and not really having that much time to prepare. So who knows, mate? Hopes are not extremely high. And then I also wanted to get your thoughts on this Na'Vi roster, who obviously they obviously did make a change after DPC Season 1, bring in Ramses for General, and now bring in No One and Seneko for Iceberg and Always Want to Fly. What do you think about this team, their potential? Another team that has changed, two big players to their roster, but bringing more established names in No One and Seneko. What do you think is sort of the ceiling for this team? And how likely do you think they'll be to win the qualifiers?
I think I have really solid chances to win the qualifiers. I mean, I'm not a fan of teams doing this personally. I like seeing the teams build a story together and everything. I was a fan of Iceberg
Yeah.
particularly, so I was very big fan of General. That was the change that surprised me the most. The General for Ramses. I think the other
Yeah.
two. I mean, no one is just so good, right? I don't know. I can't imagine having any mid laner in my team and be like, nah, I don't want no one. He's just amazing. He's still really, really good. So I feel like
Mhm.
because, as you said, they're such established players, they have pretty solid chances. Their level is incredibly up there. But if I'm honest with you, I would still put Team Spirit above him, still today,
Yeah.
because I don't know if they can build the chemistry just yet. I know a lot of them have played together in the past, but I've heard some issues perhaps in communication, stuff like that you can't iron out quite easily. And I mean, if no one is willing to leave a team like Gambit right before the major, they're how does that attitude translate into doing well with Navi? Say if a match goes wrong for them, say if they don't perform
Exactly.
as
Yeah.
well, right? I feel like there's an easy, quick decline for a team like that.
Mhm.
I
And
actually, sorry, I have a
oh, go on.
question about
Yeah.
the new Navi roster. Because I haven't watched much, if any, Eastern Europe. How has Ramses adapted to the offlane? Because I know he played offlane briefly when he was with EG, but it did not look amazing. It was partially, I think, because not just his fault, but yeah, is he kind of adapted at this point?
Mm, I mean, like I said, I compared to General, I actually
Mm-hmm.
prefer General as a more traditional offlaner.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think Ramses fulfills a bit of a different role. I don't know if he's adapted. Like, it reminds me a bit of when what was the other Resolution rotated to the offlane. Remember? And at first he was kind of playing one from the three position, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how it felt like. And to some degree, because Ramses had already an offlane hero pool. I remember back when he was back on VP and he used to play like NP carry, a Centaur carry, and you're like, Ramses, why? Pick something normal. And Ramses like, nah, these heroes work. He used to play Broodmother carry as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he did have a pool of heroes that adapted well to the offlane, but I think the farm priority is not always there. But now with someone that's played with him before, like no one, I think it will work even better. I am a fan of Ramsey. I think the guy is really good. Mm, I don't know if he's adapted incredibly well just yet. I think Rezo is a bit above him in that sense because he just hasn't gotten to play that much. But I'm reserving my judgment because I haven't really seen Navi in a while. I mean, we haven't gotten to see him at all since the leagues, right? And in the leagues, this iteration certainly looked weaker than last one. That's why I'm a bit doubtful.
Yeah. For me, I think it's that Ramses hasn't been especially impressive on the offlane, but he hasn't been
Yeah.
bad by any means. He's just been sort of, for me, replacement level. And I think that a lot of talk about Na'Vi bringing in Ramses was to sort of act like a leader for them. And obviously now they've kicked Always Wanna Fly, it's clear that he was not the leader. And I
Yeah.
think that that change was more of a sort of, right, we're having these big chemistry issues that are threatening to blow apart this team. Let's bring in someone established who can lead a team, who's drafted for, high-level teams before. And now, obviously, they've made more changes. And yeah, I'm actually really excited to see how this team does. As you mentioned, it's never nice to see teams kick their established players, especially the General one. That was one that I didn't exactly see at first because
Yeah.
I just think General's one of the best off-laners and also mid-laners. This guy was like a top-tier mid-laner for a long time. I would actually like to see someone pick him up, but looking up and down the roster, it doesn't seem like there's anywhere for him at the moment.
Yeah, I
And
agree with
then,
you. General's amazing. I feel
Mhm.
like I like him a lot. I think he's one of my favorite like space grading offlaners. I think the meta when it was the Necronomicon meta where you pick an offlaner that can push your tier one, which was
Yeah,
the last
they would
major.
just pick him.
He was
They would just
he
pick him
was so
like
good.
Enigma and Beastmaster every game.
Yeah,
And he would just sit in the opponent's triangle. Yeah,
yeah, he was very
and
solid.
then
Then I think that was his best meta for sure.
for sure, yeah. And then finally, just I guess what would be considered the favorites and my favorite team, Team Spirit. Talk to me about what you see from this Team Spirit team. Obviously, I think made a lot of fans at the major. Had a pretty, didn't make it too far, but had a pretty impressive performance. Big win over Alliance, and obviously going 6-1 on the group stage, a market improvement from last season. What would you say is like the key for this team? What's the play that really stands out for you?
Mm. I think it's Toronto Tokyo.
Yeah.
Probably the play that stands out to me. I mean, It's hard not to make him stand out because it's such a unique playstyle. I love him every time he plays Invoker. The guy is such a
Yeah.
such a crazy. Like you ask any Invoker player how you play, like, oh, I build my Urn, I go gank the lanes. Maybe your Quasi Zord, oh, I'll build my Midas like Quickva did, right? And I'll try to farm Bell. And then Turntuk is like, no, I build Blink, BKB, and I start fights by using Deafening Blast. What? Why? Why are you playing this way? The guy
Who
is
plays
it's
like this?
genuinely insane. Yeah, exactly. He's such a balls to the wall type of guy. I love it. It's hard not to be his fan.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't know. The Team Spirit just stands out a lot. I remember watching Cascade back when he was on. Sorry, Collapse back when he was on Cascade, and
Mhm.
his offlaning style of like the just consistent offlaner makes it. Heroes like Tidehunter that weren't really that good, honestly, in the meta still stand out for him. Yatora is one of the best farmers I've seen in a while coming out from Eastern Europe. I see a lot of potential for him. I think the team as a whole, I mean, Miroslav has always been a staple with that Dark Willow. Absolutely wonderful. The team as a whole just shines, and that's what I like, right? It's a team of 5. It's not a single standout
Yeah.
player. They have unique play styles, but the unique play styles comes as a team. And you can tell
Mhm.
by the way that they play. It's very different to, honestly, most of the teams of the major.
And I think what really helps is obviously this is a team with not a lot of experience, but being led by Miposhka and Silent as well as their coach. I think that's got to be a huge boost for them. You know, a group of players who haven't played at major events, but two guys that can really, right the ship and be really good leaders for this team. I think that's got to do a world of difference for these young players.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, actually. And I think being young and like this combination of young and old that China's been doing for ages is probably the best,
Yeah.
the best formula for a team. Because the young players get much more excited. I mean, I remember the Beast Coast guys kept telling me this about Team Spirit. It's like don't discount them. First of all, a lot of teams were already discounting them in the major, which gave them a bit of an edge. Not gonna lie, but
Yeah.
you don't discount them because when you have these young players, some days they'll just perform at a level that you would never expect because
Hmm.
they're just so excited. They're just excited to play. And then you add that to the consistency or experience of an older player, particularly someone like Silent, as you mentioned, who's been playing in the CIS scene since, and I feel like he's played longer than I've casted. And the guy is just insane. He was a really really good tactical carry back in the day. You know, he's known for Gyrocopter, Spectre, the
Yeah.
traditional carries. Nothing too weird. The guy was just very solid as a carry, and I do feel like it's a really good combination. That's why Team Spirit is to me the favorite by a quite a long shot. I would put him above Navi by a lot, honestly, in these qualifiers.
Yeah. I think I would have to agree. And obviously, as a Team Spirit fan, I'm hoping for them to get their final qualifier spot. Hoping to see them at TI10.
Me
Uh,
too.
right. Yeah. So those are the sort of the three favorites we talked about there: Spirit, Gambit, Na'Vi. You also mentioned Puck Champ. Is there anything you want to particularly point out about this team? Obviously, being promoted last season, uh,
Mhm.
managed to get a pretty decent result in DPC season 2. What do you see from this team as sort of why are you so high on them essentially?
I feel like this team, they're like Team Spirit junior per se, right? Because they're
Yeah.
somewhat younger players. They are led. I think they have a good analyst and coaching team from what I've heard. Their social media, everything, the support system around them is pretty good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they are very young player. They're young players with not too much experience competitive, with particularly weird strats. I mean, the IO carry was something they were running last season a lot, like to a ridiculous
Mm.
degree on Krilat. I feel like their playstyle is also somewhat unique. The only issue I have for them is really the consistency. Because of that, I mean, how hard is it to be consistent for like say 4 or 5 matches, right? In a league, it's difficult, but you play 4 or 5 matches in 3 days, you know, which is I'm assuming it's an upper bracket run. If it's lower bracket, maybe a bit more, right? But that's
Yeah.
the idea. I don't think it's that difficult for them to consistently play well for those matches. And if they just happen to have a good day and on day, I think they can beat any team because their playstyle is really unique. They make some mistakes but mostly correct themselves, and they're a hard team to predict with a really good support system. So I do value them quite highly because of that. Whereas other teams I feel like are more consistent, and I wouldn't say they can beat the top teams because they're never that good. PuckChamp, I mean, they beat Navi for a reason. Yeah, it was not the greatest game by Navi, but PuckChamp was playing incredible that game as well. So
Yeah.
it's that's reason that I put him a bit above the rest of the teams.
Hmm. Yeah. There's a couple of things you said there that I totally agree with. Like we come back to this young players being led by old players. You talked about the support system. When you have Art Style as your coach, I don't think you can
Yeah.
ask for anything more. Is one of the most famed players and coaches in Eastern Europe history, I guess. That's got to be a big help. And yeah, you talked about sort of not having to be super consistent to win a qualifier. I think that sort of helps for these teams like PuckChamp, where you don't have to be super consistent over the course of a league. You just have to win, one like 3 series potentially, maybe get a few upsets in there, and that's you done. So I think there is definitely an element of that perhaps teams who have higher highs but still have those lows could have a better performance in the qualifiers as opposed to a team who was super consistent over the DPC season but never really beat teams above them. Is there any other teams from sort of the upper bracket that catch your eye? I know that sort of Hellraisers was one I was really interested in getting promoted. Obviously, it's a team with a few names that people will obviously recognize. And I know you casted a lot of lower division Eastern Europe. What did you like from this Hellraisers team?
I actually, that was the team I was going to mention actually. So one point there. I think Hellraiser is just. I mean, it is against lower division teams, so there's a little asterisk there, right? But I will say this: I think their performance is just very clean, compared to a lot of the Eastern European teams, where it's very common for them to be overconfident, overplay their hand a bit. Sometimes draft and you go, oh, I'm gonna draft something really weird, and it doesn't work out, right? The Hellraisers is just good Dota, right? But not good Dota in the same sense of consistency you find from Extreme or Unique, where they try to do their best, but sometimes it doesn't work out. I find like for Hellraisers, I mean, the level of improvement I've seen from the last season to this season was insane. It was only one change of a player, and I think Vanscore is very good too. But they're just a really solid team in every regard. They have good picks and solid drafts. They understand the meta quite well, particularly because they have someone like Zayats, who I think is one of the best drafters in the CIS region and one of the best captains in general as well. They have really solid mechanical cores. Some of the more consistent cores as well, like Resolution and Kuman, I think are don't really make mistakes most of the time. Sometimes that's an issue, but I think in this team it works out well. I honestly do believe that Hellraiser has a chance. For me, I wouldn't say like a 40-50, but maybe like a 10-15% chance of making it, because if they play their best and if they've improved in these months that we didn't get to see them, they might really surprise some teams who are underestimating them.
Yeah, I've almost really happy to see Hellraisers is doing very well this DPC season, because I think in the first season people saw this Hellraisers team, saw this roster, and was like, how is this team going to lose? And it seemed like there were some games where they just wouldn't turn up. Like you'd see moves from them. You'd think then they're just not trying to win the game at some points. Like it just seemed like they weren't doing their best to win. But I've been, as you said, a remarkable improvement on last season, and obviously winning that promotion to upper division. We're not sure whether next season at DPC will be same upper division, but securing a spot in the qualifiers. And I think, as you said, this is a team with high caliber players who could function well in a qualifier environment. You've got people like Resolution, obviously people know him for TI6, TI7, just being one of the best players in the world at some points. You've got Zayats, who you mentioned, one of the best drafters in CIS, also one of the best 4 positions in CIS. I mean, he played on VP for a long time. Lil, I mean, this team is incredibly stacked in terms of talent, but the question for them, for me at least, for them has been, can they put it all together in a consistent package? And I think now you're starting to see that a bit more. Perhaps they could make a deep run in this qualifiers.
And even Young G, I think the patch really benefits him. Like this guy is, I mean, he's called Young G for a reason, right? It's as a nod to God, or G now, who's playing 5. But if you're like a CIS veteran, he was one of the better mid laners. And also one of the more consistent ones back in the day. And Young G's hero pool is just so buffed right now. Like these tempo controlling mids is exactly what he likes to play. Yeah, Void Spirit's a bit out, but the Puck is full form. The Lina, who's actually been coming back a bit, he's also pretty solid with, because of course he's God. He's just younger God. And the Ember Spirit, which is his best hero, I think is quite good right now. And we've seen some solid performances as he's overtaken his brothers a bit. So I do feel like this is a patch that Young G is going to excel in, which is why I give these teams like some decent chances. I still think Team Spirit is better, and certainly even Navi's better for sure. But Hellraisers, hey, they could surprise you if they get underestimated.
Yeah, sure.
I want to interject for just a brief moment here. I was curious what your thoughts. This is off topic from kind of what we were talking about, but I was just curious what your thoughts on were the format for this, because I think one of the things that does hurt these teams that might want to make like a deep run is maybe the lack of like a group stage that we've seen in previous qualifiers. Like if you remember TI9, Navi in the qualifiers went like 4-3, I think. Like they weren't looking great, and then were able to close it out and really make a comeback. And in this format, that simply could not happen. I wonder if you think that's going to allow for like the best teams to really rise, like the cream to rise to the top, or if that maybe benefits some of these like more deep run teams.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of group stage formats always to decide the strength. I know that the reason why group stages don't happen has nothing to do with Dota. It has to do with like the costs, right, of running qualifiers. And group stages are just very expensive to run, and the casters, I mean not casters, viewers just don't like them, unfortunately. Like I wish viewers were more engaged in these things. And we don't. When you tell viewers like, oh, if they get these points and then they beat this team, then they'll be able to make it. And viewers don't care. They tune out. You know, viewers want to know like, oh, this best of 3 means elimination, this best of 3 means lower bracket. Like that's easier for them to follow, and that's why I think there's no group stages. But I do find that this makes it a bit unfair. Like a good example of these I'm looking at the brackets right now, and a good example of this is like, for example, Gambit, who I think is a really solid team. First round, they get to be against Hellraisers. I mean, Hellraisers is a team that was in lower division last season. They've improved a lot in this season. Of course, they're not going to have great DPC points. Like, they were in lower division. They started there anyway. If you assume that this is the first season as well, and therefore the upper divisions were a bit shaky and a lot of changes can happen, I would say that an easier matchup for Hellraisers would be either Extremum or Unique. For Gambit, would be Extreme or Unique, who have not performed too well this season. Hell, even Windstrike would be better for them, or even PuckChamp in some situations, depending on the matchups. But they get to be against Hellraisers in a completely unproven team the first round. Oof, that's tough for them. Compared to their opponents, like the top opponents, which is Team Spirit against Windstrike, pretty nice. Now to Navi against Extremum, even nicer. Extremum was bottom of the upper division. Not to put these guys, not to say these guys are weak or anything, but it's a format that might not always draw the best matchups. And even some of the teams that are like should already get benefit, like Team Empire, they already get a buy round. Fantastic Five already gets a buy round due to people just dropping out and stuff like that. Why do they get advantage over teams like, say, Bait or Nemiga, who could make a deeper run, but won't get this chance because they already have to beat a difficult enemy in the beginning? I think group stages definitely should be added, but I understand the cost restrictions. I don't know. I'm a fan of the best kind of Dota, but I don't think that's possible. I'm just kind of... I think I'm preaching to the choir as well. I don't think anyone like formats that group stages either.
Interesting. One thing I didn't realize is that Extreme got last in upper division.
Yeah.
But because they have, I think, leftover DPC points, they get to start in the upper bracket. I didn't realize that was a thing. I thought it was just like top 6 from upper division, and then the 2 that got promoted go to upper bracket.
But I realized in this format, like Team Empire should be up there, right? And then Navi would have a much, I would argue, a bit more difficult matchup. Yeah,
that is... I think you got to feel a little bit hard done by if you're Team Empire. I mean, I'm sure you get a buy, but that's... starting in lower bracket and starting in upper bracket are 2 completely different beasts, Obviously, I don't have to tell anyone that, it's a fairly obvious thing, but yeah, that is... It's interesting.
Yeah, that's there's a similar thing in NA where Sad Boys, the team that their only game that they won was against the Cut, who everyone kind of expected.
Yeah.
They are in the upper bracket, despite not looking as good as any of the other teams in upper division at all.
Also, the first match against Black and Yellow, like, oh, let's start with a grudge match and let's go. Like, spicy storylines right here. I agree with you completely there. This is going to happen the first season. I think when we have or the first set of seasons, right? I think maybe when we get to second year of DPC, these things will be more evened out because you won't get the advantage of being able to start in the upper division that a lot of teams got just because of some namesake, right? So I think this will be a bit better over time, but right now it is a bit of a mess.
We'll have more results too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Most things to draw on and everything. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and then just to finally round it out, I guess, I think we've talked about quite a lot of these teams. Are there any teams from this lower division who you think could potentially go quite far? I mean, obviously people might look at Bait, obviously they've got Dendy, and another disappointing, unfortunately, season for them. You've also got Fantastic Five, who want to impress a lot of people from last season, also this season, but couldn't quite make it to the upper bracket. Who do you sort of, who would you have making it the farthest out of these lower bracket teams?
I mean, Empire is obviously looking pretty good to me. I think they were a really solid team in this last season. I am also personally a big fan of Vanscore, so I think this team works out nicely. They also have some unique picks for Smiley Knight, who's like the Lycan carry, which I loved particularly for them, which I think can surprise some teams that might underestimate them, particularly those coming from upper division. But that's no surprise. Most people will probably say Empire. I was actually gonna say Nemiga. I was actually a big fan of Nemiga here in the lower division. I think they did really well. But I don't know if you guys know they lost one of their players to the army. Well, sorry, that sounds like he died.
Oh.
He had to go to army service. Hellscream, their 4, which has been their 4 for a really, really, really long time. Like Nemiga, the org, had to go to army service, and they're trying to keep him in this roster as much as possible, and they couldn't, and because eventually, duty calls or whatever. And so they have Heaven, which I have not really had the time to investigate about. I'm not really sure how good this team is going to be without Hellscream. Usually one change doesn't matter that much, but I think Nemiga had a very solid identity. I would have actually given them, like, I thought they could make it to like lower bracket round 3 easily because they were looking pretty solid, but I'm going to hold my judgment due to this change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like you said, one change doesn't necessarily mean the world, but when that player is a pretty integral part of your sort of identity as a team, it can change entirely how you play. You can sometimes find yourself just like lost on what to do, what to draft, what to play. But I mean, hopefully they'll be able to bounce back. That is unfortunate, losing someone to conscription right before TI qualifiers. Obviously not an ideal situation. Yeah, what can you do, I guess.
Hey,
and then
March
any
came
other
back
teams?
Stronger, so who knows?
That's true. Yeah.
They make Hellscream
Just
out
when
of
he has that
army.
one summer.
Yeah.
He's gonna be.
Yeah.
He's gonna be stronger than ever. And then any other teams here that interest you?
I mean, I want to say Fantastic Five, but I feel like their matchup against Hellraiser or Gambit is going to eliminate them no matter what drops. I feel like Fantastic Five can't deal against them, so that's. I want to support the team, but I think the brackets don't benefit them too much. And I think those are the two. Those are the teams I would say. I mean, I want to root for Bait. I always root for Pate. It's hard not to root for Dendy. I think the guy is super cute. Like as a personality, I think he's just great. And the team has been improving slightly, but I don't think improving enough to beat the teams that are playing against them.
I know you say that everyone likes Dendy, but every time I go on to watch a Bait match, everyone hates Dendy. Everyone's like, Dendy retire, go play 5 or something. I don't understand
I don't
it. Like
get that.
the guy is the nicest guy in Dota.
I don't understand. You'll have toxic players that are playing. I'm not gonna name anyone, but there's some toxic pro players, right? And you'd be like, this guy's great. I love him so much. Dendy, meanwhile, is literally a ray of sunshine, and people just want to kill him. I don't like the comments are so toxic. When we were doing last season and Bait was playing, they were doing a bit worse. Oh my goodness, the moderation of Dendy matches were the worst. They were such mean people, and I felt so bad because I mean, regardless of me being a personal fan or not, because of course I've been casting Dota for a while, so it's hard not to be a fan of Dendy. I just don't understand why you would ever dislike someone like that. Watch him in free to play. He is such a likable personality. Why do people throw shade at him? What is wrong with the world, man? I don't know.
I don't get it. Yeah, doesn't make sense. Right. Anyway, I think we have pretty much discussed all the teams that may have a shot. But let's make it concrete. Ava, who do you have winning the Eastern Europe TI qualifier spot?
Team Spirit, 100%.
Yeah, I think I also have to go with Team Spirit, and that's not just me. Being a fan and hoping to will it into existence. I just do think that a couple of these teams,
right? A bit of
both, yeah. I think a couple of these teams could potentially have a high ceiling, but I just haven't seen like Na'Vi. I don't know how they're going to perform, but I know that the Team Spirit have been extremely consistent, extremely well performing over the past few months or so. So I'm going to go with Team Spirit. Beats. Who have you got winning?
I will be the dissenter here. I have Na'Vi winning. I like the new roster. I mean, I don't like the way that it got formed, but I do like. It's a good looking roster.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's just about all for Eastern Europe. We'll be back with the other regions. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. All right, and we're back with Avo Plus. Okay, so on this one we're gonna be. Did I say it wrong again, or did I get it right that time?
Yes, no,
Okay,
that's
beautiful,
correct. Yeah.
beautiful. I think in the other one I said it wrong. I might have to I might have to do a dub. So
That's
on
it.
this one we're gonna be talking about South America. I know he's watched quite a bit of South America. I've watched a good bit of South America as well. So yeah, let's just dive straight into it. So I guess the first question on the docket is which teams in this upper bracket do you think look the strongest right now?
Noping.
Is that the general
Doping three
consensus?
times. I think doping is a bit. I mean, they're a step above the rest, in my opinion. Like in general, right? Both as a team, I would have said that even in season 2 DPC, right? I don't think the results in the major were too reflective of them.
Mhm.
And after the major, I saw them. I mean, so I can say, in the major I was Beast Coast and the Noping guys and Beast Coast guys are good friends, right? So after they lost, we actually went down to see them a couple of times, and just to cheer them up, because they're good people. And I was surprised by how well they took the loss. I mean, for Panda and for Oscar, it was their first their first line event ever. Actually, Dagmalo too. Panda and Oscar are, especially Oscar, is like a very older player. They always call him the old guy because he's, I think, 26. I want to say, and the poor guy was destroyed. But then after talking to a bit, it was quite surprising how quickly they picked themselves back up. So I don't think that loss is too big a deal, and I still think they are quite above a lot of the other teams. Some teams could surprise us, but I think if I were going by consistency's sake or the team that deserves to be there, I definitely think it's Noping, in my opinion.
I'm curious, was the consensus at the major, or just in general, that although Noping were able to beat out Beast Coast in the tiebreaker, that Beast Coast may have been a stronger team, or is the consensus that Noping is that number one spot in South America right now?
I mean, if you ask Beast Coast, they're definitely not going to say that. They think they are the number one spot. I'm not really sure. I mean, God, the South American scene has so many people that are just really diehard fans of one team, right? So they'll take the opportunity to like attack any other team. I feel like the consensus is that Beast Coast might be a bit better in the international scene due to their experience, right?
Yeah.
The criticism that Noping often gets, though I don't entirely agree with this, but they do get this criticism very often that they're not versatile enough in their playstyles. They always try to play a variation of 4-1. And even though Beast Coast is seen that way too to international audiences, because Hector likes farming, it's a bit different because you actually have seen a lot of iterations of Beast Coast where they'll farm much more on Weesped, or they'll farm a bunch of Chris Luck, or they'll variate their strategies. Whereas Noping, for the most part, HFN likes to hit creeps, and you want to give that Mago something he doesn't farm on. And in fact, a lot of the teams consider that Mago both their biggest strength and their biggest weakness because of his really, really small hero pool and how much he likes hitting creeps. That's a big issue, actually, that Mago has to work on.
Okay. Well, I guess if you were forced at gunpoint to give another team from the upper bracket that you think you could do it, what do you think it could be?
I would actually give 3 teams that are more or less even in terms of chances.
Okay.
I would give Infamous because, I mean, long-standing org. They did change one player. Parker calls himself stupid, but I do think the guy's pretty good. Most players trust in him. South America proves some pretty good carries, so I don't think that's too much of a concern. The team in general is solid. In a similar vein, I would give Unknown. Now with Pacaz, they're looking very strong. I think Unknown before was already pretty good. Not in this DPC season, but DPC Season 1, right?
Yeah.
Where they had Yadomi, because that team actually had some pretty decent drafts, really good ideas. I think Season 2, losing Yadomi was a big, big mistake, but I still think this team is strong now that they added Pacaz. Much better carry. And actually, in my opinion, one of the best carries in South America. And then finally, talking about really good carries, I would give Hokoria a pretty solid chance. People sleep on this team a lot because they don't have like an org. Like an org per se, it's more of a stack with a logo. They are completely unknown players for the TPC, except for Analog, which played in some Brazilian stacks. But my God, Lumiere is so good. Like, this guy will carry your games. This guy is actually insane. I think he's level of Hector, level of HFN, level of Pacaz. He's very, very good. And the mids they had before, Nero was not that great. I think Mr. Jeans was just okay. Analog, I think, is a really solid mid when I saw him in crewmates. And they also have a really good support duo of Gardic and El Misho. El Misho particularly is one of the up-and-coming fours in South America. So I like Kokori a lot too. I think these 3 teams could potentially take it, but with equal chances to all of them. my opinion.
So you would not give a chance to SG Esports. I've seen some people kind of
Yeah,
give them a bit of a pull, but you just don't think they have the
I
stuff
want
right now.
to. I mean, I want to because they're such good players, right? I've been
Mhm.
following SG since forever. Not just the I mean, not just the org, which is whatever, but the players I think are really good. I would not discount any of these players, but I mean, you saw them in the last CPC. It was not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
They're having some problems. I mean, I don't know what they are, but clearly or I can't speak to them. I've heard rumors. I don't want to speak to these rumors, but they're having some internal problems for sure. Their games look so clean in the first 20 minutes, and then I'm looking at a pub team like the next 20, and I don't understand how that's possible with these players are being so good because they genuinely are top tier players. If they manage to keep it together for the whole upper bracket, there is a chance, but I've seen them falter way too often for me to have too much trust in them, in my opinion.
Yeah. Another team I wanted to mention, because I think there was a point in time where I would have maybe placed this team a little higher. It would be Ego Boys. I know they're a lower division team,
Yep.
but I remember BTS Pro Series. I think the season before last season, they actually had I think they had a decent run. And there were some good teams in that one. Undying played in that one. Four Zoomers still played in that one. I think they may have taken a game off of Zoomers.
I think so as well. Yeah.
And they got first place in the lower division. So I think there's a small possibility that their first game's against Infamous, so it's not looking great. I think they got 2-0'd in the last Pro Series. So against Infamous, I think that's who that knocked them out actually. So and then the other one, just because we haven't mentioned it, is Gillette Infinity, and then I don't want to take a crack at pronouncing this one just because I know my pronunciation of words for this region can be awful. Is it Binomistas?
Binomistas.
Binomistas. Okay. I was thinking of it like dinosaur. Every time I see it, I think dinosaur. But
yeah, I'm not entirely. So the name, in case anyone's wondering, the name actually is supposed to be it's like a cryptocurrency exchange app, I think, right? Which apparently is sponsoring them. I wasn't aware of this. I thought it was just a joke. But Binomistas, so istas is like it's a suffix in Spanish you would add, or in Portuguese I'm assuming is similar. You add to like when someone is a job, like as an example, like lámpara is lamp, right? And then lampista is the guy who fixes them, right? That's the kind of idea, right? Or bicicleta is bicycle, ciclista is the guy who rides bicycles for a living. So I'm assuming, and then binomio, which is the word I think it comes from, means like a duo, like specifically like a royal duo, something like very high up. Very odd. I don't know what the hell this team means. I have no clue. I saw this name, I was like, this is funny to pronounce, but I have why. So yeah, I also give this team a lot of high chances though. I actually am a big fan of Binomistas. I think they're really good too.
The thing that stroked me. It's like the name is quite fun to say, just Binomistas.
Right?
Like, it just rolls off the tongue quite nicely. But I
does. It's a very good name.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to actually get your thoughts on this team because you mentioned that you weren't too confident about SG Sports and their sort of chances in this qualifier. Benamis is going up against SG Sports in this first round. How do you think that one might play out? Because looking at this Benamis roster, there's a couple of players that I actually recognise, not being too much of an expert on the SA region, but Benny and Sexy Fat are two players that I have seen in other teams and have seen perform pretty well. So, what do you think about this team's sort of chances?
Actually, I have a funny story. When we were in the major after Beast Coast was eliminated, we liked playing this game called Brackets, where each person would draw the brackets for like a close qualifier, would guess, and mostly it was just the person who's doing the brackets, and everyone else would laugh at them. And I told people that I thought Benamis could beat SG because I actually have a pretty heavy belief in them, and all of Beast Coast laughed at me. But I'm vouching for them. I'm gonna bat for this team. I honestly think they're quite good. Sexy Fat was in. I think you might remember him from Bait the first TPC. Because he was one of the Brazilians that went down there. Jupiter and Nuages have been part of this like scene for a fair amount of time, like these secondary stacks. In Brazil, there was always the SG or Team Brazil, whatever, the main stack, and then there was a bunch of others that kind of scrambled through. I feel like Jupiter and Nuages have some. I mean, I think they were the Motoka at one point. Oh no, it was Spirit, sorry, it was Spirits they were playing in. And they have some pretty decent performances, in my opinion. I think these players are quite solid. Mini is a very good mid laner as well. Not as good as 4DR, but considering how the team is working together, I think it's a bit better. And Benny has been playing with Brazilians his whole life. Even though he is Peruvian, he lives in Argentina. He's been playing with Brazilians his whole life. So I actually give this team some solid chances. When I talk to them, they are very good friends. They get along great. They have really good team chemistry. Sometimes they lack in experience, which is true, and I don't know if they can make it through. Like, it's a bit difficult to have that kind of. You're up against some tough teams, but I do think they can beat SG and go. They have a relatively deep run, and if they go down to lower bracket, I can imagine these guys being the Grim Reaper of the lower bracket, honestly, because they're pretty solid against most lower division teams.
I'm gonna apologize up front. I didn't watch any lower division South America. So I'm curious, but before I get into the lower bracket, is there, as there is in NA, is there a big gap between the like kind of top two teams in lower division and then the rest of the field?
I wouldn't say there's as big a gap in it as I've seen, because I actually casted both lower division South America, lower division North America. The gap in North America is quite huge, I would argue. I mean, maybe not so much this season. Like, I would say the upper division, lower division gaps are massive, right? In South America, I think there's a big gap between the bottom two. I think the bottom two don't offer the best. There's some really shaky performances, though, by most teams, so it's so hard for me to determine, like, at least in the NA, teams are consistently good or bad. In South America, I don't know, dude. I've seen some games where I was like, what am I watching? From like a good team, and I'll be like, is this Dota anymore? What is this play style? And then sometimes a team that's like really, really awful for the most part, they'll pull off a miracle against one of the better teams. Like, is this, again, why? How does this happen so consistently? So I think the gap is not as big, I would say, in South America, but the gap is more seen, rather than the results or individual matches, over the consistency of the league. I think there's where the gap lies, more than the fact that the Dota individually is good or bad. Because most of the players here individually are pretty solid, I would say.
Okay. So I guess that's a good segue into the lower bracket. So all of these teams are going to, unlike some of the other brackets, all of these teams are going to have to play against someone from the upper bracket. Do you think that actually hurts a lot, like most of these teams' chances? Or do you think there's a team here that, based on one of these matchups, could possibly make a run?
Let's see. Think I'll give a chance to crewmates, which is now Intritus. I think these guys have a chance. Like, if it's Infinity that drops, which I'm assuming. I mean, if no ping loses to Infinity, then there goes my prediction, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's Infinity that drops. I think these guys have a chance of not only beating Infinity, but meeting Latin Defenders or Hokori if they happen to be on a good day. They have really solid individual players. In fact, I would put these as the up-and-coming Brazilians together with Binamistas. They're looking quite solid. I was a big fan of crewmates in the last season. So yeah, I think these guys can make a fairly deep run. Don't have much faith in. Latin Defenders looked really bad last season, I'll be honest. Omega Gaming are quite well known for not putting any effort. I was trying to find a nicer way of saying that. In case you guys don't follow the scene, the reason why Mingate got kicked by Omega, or no ping, right, it was actually because the guy refused to train. He refused to use scrims, he refused to play Dota. He's actually playing PlayStation all the time. He refused to train at all. And so, do I put a lot of faith in a team that has someone like that, or that has players that are known to do that? Probably not, right? Because they're probably not going to see a sizable improvement or put enough effort to beat him. So that's my concern with teams like Omega or Latam, or I mean, Inverse is just too new, so that's why I wouldn't give them too many chances. But I think crewmates can do it. I think crewmates have a solid roster.
Okay, yeah, I want to ask about Latam quickly, actually, because I know that this team qualified to upper division first season. They had a little bit of controversy with, I believe it was Aretes making some comments that we don't want to speak about here. But yeah, a real fall from grace for them, being qualifying to upper division and now finishing bottom two in the low division. What's gone wrong for this team? Because this is a pretty substantial drop in quality, I think.
So I'm assuming you knew the original. The original drama that they had as Latin Defenders, which was that they originally had the roster, well, not anymore, not the same exact roster, but it was very similar to the roster Infinity had That was the roster by Latam Defenders. And then Infinity went, and it's mine now. Infinity sponsored that roster instead. Latam Defenders had to reform a roster, in the last few days of DPC before the season 1. So that was already a huge trauma for these guys.
Yeah.
But so you guys know, it wasn't the situation where like Infinity came by and like they punched Latam Defenders owner and they took the players, kidnapped them and forced them to play. It was the players themselves who chose to play for Infinity over Latam Defenders, right? Which, again, not judging internally, but that does signify something about the organization. Like, what does that mean about the org? Why are the players more willing to play with a different org than these guys? Something must be more attractive about Infinity than Latam Defenders. And Infinity is not one of the well-known orgs at SA either. So it could be these players, though I think they're quite solid for the most part, are not playing in the best environment, and that might have led to this downfall.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Because I remember Latam Defenders, they didn't look amazing. When I think it was they played BTS Pro Series. I always judge it based off of like how they do against some of the NA stacks because those are stacks that they're not necessarily like scrimming as much. So it almost seems like it might be more of a real test of like where their strength lies in being able to play on an international stage or in like in a tournament. But they didn't look great there. They looked okay. They were one of those teams that was like able to take games off of like pretty much every team, but not close it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, my hopes aren't the highest for them.
That's kind of the thing with the most of the SA teams, I would say, maybe bar Noping, is that like even Infamous and Hokori and Unknown fall into this category where it reminds, if you guys have been long Dota fans, you'll remember like SCA 5 years ago, where you have like insane mechanical talent. Oh my god, these cores are so good, but there's no captains and there's nobody to lead them, right? I feel like South America is kind of going through that, where honestly they can pretty much beat anyone. There's a phrase in Spanish which I learned when I was with Beast Coast, because it's not in my native Spanish, it's in Peruvian Spanish. It's when someone is empilado, which means someone is like motivated to win per se, but and almost like in the animes when the person like has like the aura around them and they're about to, like their brother just died or something, and they know they can defeat the enemy because like they see the power, the force or some chakra or whatever it is, that moment. That is what a lot of the South American teams believe in, and no joke, they have. Like, there's moments where I've watched some players, even in lower division, make some plays, and I'm just like, oh, my mouth is a gap. I'm in awe. I can't believe that's such a good play. But then they can't reproduce that consistently for more than like one match, right? Because their skill level is there, but the consistency and many times the ethics or the hard work is not necessarily there, and that's what sets these teams back. So I think a lot of teams like Latam Defenders, you go, oh, they can take games off better teams, but they can't do it all the time. And this is what these brackets are. That's why I think South America is going to be very fun to watch, because you honestly will never know what's going to happen. Except for Noping, I think for the most part, you're like, who will win, man? It depends on who's coming in with like a better breakfast or in a better mood, who has a girlfriend nearby to like give him more emotional support. It's honestly based on those, I think, much more than anything else.
I like the breakfast tiebreaker.
Be ready for that. I mean, yeah, you're totally right, because I remember last season everyone thought Beast Coast was just gonna rip through the season, and then they lost that game to, it was Infamous, right?
Yeah. And that's also because Infamous, by the way, shout out to Mariano Papita, as we would call him in SA. The guy is like a lifestyle guru. I kid you not, if you look at his Instagram, Mariano Caneda, by the way, promotion for him, he is quite literally that kind of person that like teaches you ways to meditate, teaches you how to eat healthy. So he's like a huge driving force behind Infamous's success. I think if the guy never makes it as a player, if he ever decides to retire, he would be one of the best coaches in the scene, particularly in SA. He is very good at that kind of mentality game, which is why Infamous tends to be a bit more consistent with the results, and why I give it a bit more faith in general.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting tidbit of information. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on is because you did mention this. It's a concept in Dota that's always kind of fascinated me. Is like the concept of not having leaders in a scene, because I think it's something that it plagued SEA, as you said. I think it's still it's something that's being fixed in NA a little bit. Certainly not in lower division, but definitely in upper division. You have teams that are. I think there was a big ego problem for a while. So while there may have been leaders in NA, no one wanted to listen to them, and now there's a little more openness to like, oh shit, if we want to actually like succeed, we need someone to kind of drive us a little bit. Who are the leaders in South America, if they exist, or are there any prospective players that you think could step up and take on that role?
Okay, so let me think. Looking back, right? So for the Peruvian scene, which is the scene I'm more familiar with, in the Brazilian scene, at least on a personal level, I know Papita is definitely one, or Mariano is definitely one of them, right? And then actually Infamous is two, Mariano and Axel, or A now, who they lovingly call Chompy. These two are like considered some of the more Dota strategists, right? Some of the top strategists. Then you have Stinger from Beast Coast, their captain. And then from Noping, Matthew. Because Panda is a bit too young, so he's not yet the leader. Matthew is much more the in-game shot caller. These are considered like the leaders, like the players that are considered the leaders. Then we have a couple of like ex-players or influencers in the scene or coaches and stuff. Like we have Benjaz, which used to be a carry player, then moved to the offlane, then moved to coaching for a bit. Has a relatively driving force in the scene. There is one of the band players, actually Smash, is pretty. I wouldn't say a leader, but someone that like kind of is a opinion leader per se, right? And then the leader of Egorco, or the leader of Ega Boys, which is Egorco, Timado's dad, is also a big opinion leader, I would say, to a degree. And those are the guys that people like respect, look up to a degree. They will listen to if they were coaches, or they will actually, there's not going to be an ego clash. And then for some of the up-and-comings, I think for Brazil, they definitely have Nuages. He's a pretty big up-and-coming. He's been leading a couple of Brazilian stacks. I'm a fan of him particularly. Look out for this guy. I'm a big fan of Binamisas in general. They have, I think in SG it's King Jungles or King RD. It used to be King RD, then King Jungles kind of took over that role, from what I've heard. And Infinity has a coach called Pau Pau, which is also a caster, who's also a good driving force when it comes to these things. So these are the guys that are like up and coming to a degree in terms of leadership in SA. But I think most people, like I think most of the leaders are gonna be new. Like you won't see them coming. Very much like it happened in SEA. It's people that at one point will decide to either move positions, or one day they're like, I got a coach because I can't make it as a player, and they'll start respecting them more. Because the issue in SA that happens very often is that everyone wants to play and everyone wants to be the best. And if you want to be the best, you also can't be a leader because you're putting your own needs above the people you're leading, right? And that makes that makes it difficult for you to lead people.
Yeah, I can see that. Also, just that like being able to have the confidence to in another player to be like, oh, I'm usually like playing carry on this team, but if we want to succeed, I'm gonna need to swap here and put on that leadership position. That requires a lot of trust in your team. And when you have a lot of unestablished players, that can be a lot harder.
Yeah, exactly. And most of these players are also very young. Actually, most of the SS scene is quite young. That's why Mariano is like, he's one of the oldest people in the scene. He's 26. And everyone laughs at him for being like super old. Like they call him like a boomer, the equivalent. Like, dude, he's 26. He's 2 years older than me. Like, he's not even in the real world. He's young, but in the Dota world, he's considered like. Some people joke about how Mariano is decrepit, or like, oh, sometimes he gets Parkinson's and he like misses plays. You're like, dude, what? He's 26, man. And these are very common jokes in SA. So it's very difficult for you to respect your elders when these are the jokes that you're making as well in the community.
Yeah.
All right, so last thing, I think we're all probably going to be in agreement here, but I'd love a prediction from each person here. So yeah, go ahead. Let's start with Benji actually.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with no ping. I think, yeah, you guys have done your best to convince me. I saw how they looked at the major. I think they got unfortunate to sort of be matched up against the two NA teams. Because I think that if there's one region that knows how to deal with SA, outside of SA, it's probably NA. But I did like what I saw from them in the few matches I watched from DPC Season 2, so I'm going to go with no ping esports.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment. I did love that Quincy Crew versus No Ping game. Everyone was flaming it, and I was just like, this is some of the most fun Dota I've seen. And that's that's also what I love about watching South America is like you never know what you're gonna get, because even if it looks like they're playing bad, they force the other team to play on their level. So yeah, I'm gonna hit no ping on this one, and I think
I will also hit. Yeah, I will also hit no ping. Though I want to echo that sentiment. I agree that. I mean, I think that game is. I think it's equally as fair to say it was super fun to flame it because that was one ridiculous game of Dota. But I enjoyed it as a viewer. I thought it was very fun to watch for sure.
For sure. So that's gonna do it for our coverage of the South American regionals. Avo, you have anything you want to shout out?
No, just watch more South American Dota, guys. This region's up and coming. SEA years ago, everyone's like, aha, SEA lulled and TNC wins a major. You know, that's what happens. Give it time. This region has a lot of prospects, and they're the youngest players. It's also, by the way, the only region, for those of you like Dota Doomists, that is still increasing in players. Like the player base is still increasing in Peru, and well, not Brazil. Brazil's dying, but in Peru, it's increasing. And so is the viewership as well. So, you know, support it so Dota won't die. Woo!
This could be the only region in a few years.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out. All right. Well, Avo, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me.